My American Studies 140 students, this is your Professor Donald Earl Collins, and it's time to talk to you about your term paper assignment. I'll talk about the nuts and bolts of your assignment in terms of content in class this week, but I want to make sure that you understand that the process for which you are being evaluated as far as this assignment is concerned is different. I am doing it differently for this group for the first time. And then it's different really for a variety of reasons, mostly because it's ungraded. And while I'm doing ungrading in the upper level class I'm teaching this semester, and I've done the ungrading for classes, this is probably about my fifth or sixth time doing something ungraded in AMST 140. The truth of the matter is that this is still different. So what am I doing differently? Well, let me go over what is different in general. Most students tend to struggle with term paper assignments these days. I don't understand why. I mean, I've been doing term paper assignments of some sort. Let me see. Since the 90s, actually, this isn't due. This isn't due. I mean, you expect students college level to be able to write a college level 4 to 6 page standard term paper, but a lot of you struggle with making connections, making proper connections between different events, different kinds of ideas, different intersections in terms of isms and phobias and things of that nature. Students struggle with it. It also might be because I'm expecting you to do different writing styles in this course, right? Reflections are self-reflections where you might do some summary and analysis of a particular piece, but I'm not asking you to make any massive connections except to you personally. Some students struggle with that aspect, while others are more analytical and thoughtful on the analysis part. They struggle talking about how it relates to them, whether it had an impact on them emotionally and intellectually and otherwise. And since so many of you, for whatever reason, and this is a part, I'll spend more time on in person talking about, don't seem to care about the material for whatever reason. This is not an indictment, it's just a fact. I mean, most of you have expressed the fact that you don't care. So I'm just taking what you're saying at face value in terms of what you care and don't care about. So anyway, so what am I expecting from the term paper? Well, term paper is what it is. You need to write an introduction of a thesis statement, not throwaway sentences like, DC has always been very diverse. Well, I don't know what your definition of diverse is, and saying that's very diverse doesn't tell me anything, right? You need to write a thesis statement that deals with the questions around food access, food apartheid, food geographies, that sort of thing. You need to deal with how go-go relates to the times in which black and progressive white Washingtonians lived through, roughly between the mid-1970s, pretty much through the end of the 20th century, maybe even in the 21st, if you look at some of the more recent articles on the rise, fall, and the resurrection of go-go music over the last 40, 45 years or so. So there's an article, there are a couple of articles that take you all the way into the 21st century, and how that relates to maybe gentrification, maybe post-1968 uprising and riots in D.C., why this music became relatable to an entire generation, maybe even two generations of Washingtonians, that sort of thing. And then looking at gentrification, why did it start when it started in earnest in the 1990s, and why not, say, a decade, 2 decades after 1968, particularly for like Adams Morgan and Columbia Heights and Logan Circle and U Street and Shaw and Detroit Park, that whole uptown in Mount Vernon Square, that whole uptown area to the north of downtown DC that we've broken up into these different communities. Um, why does it take so long to start in this part of the city, as opposed to why didn't it just start within a decade? I mean, it was ripe for these kinds of things in in the 70s and in the 80s, but it didn't start until basically the end of the 90s, mid to late 1990s. Why? Talk about all of that. So content-wise, that's what we're talking about. But process-wise is different. Process-wise, in addition to writing a paper with a clear thesis statement, and a clear argument, pulling from examples from your readings, from lectures, from, the documentaries you've seen, from, some of the recordings that you have links to in the first few weeks of the class, right? You're also you're pulling from that, you're putting together a conclusion and all of those kinds of things. But instead of me just doing the simple ungrading aspect of things, which is to write down comments and give you overall feedback on your paper, what we're doing different is that you're evaluating each other, meaning that randomly each of you is, in addition to writing your paper, the following week is expected to read someone else's paper, give them feedback, and give them the grade that you think they've earned. Now, this is different. I've not done this aspect. Well, no, that's not true. I've done it before, but I've not done it for underclass folk, meaning people who are not seniors taking an upper level course where I expect you to have some level of responsibility for this. I'm giving you some of the reins. Now, this will be an anonymous process. You are not to list your name, right? You'll get someone's paper. It's 1-to-1. You'll get one person's paper. You will anonymously give them feedback and commentary on their paper, either throughout the course of their paper or at the end. You'll provide overall feedback, um, and you will try to determine what their grade's going to be, right? Based on, and what you're using to do that is the rubric in the syllabus for writing assignments, right? As close to as you can follow through on it is fine, right? I don't want you to be too hard on your classmates, but I don't want you to just give them an A just for participation. If you see stuff that's wrong, misspellings, grammar errors, stuff that doesn't make sense, I want you to comment on it. If you see something that you think is very insightful, very thoughtful, just like brilliant analysis kinds of stuff, I want you to give them feedback on that too. If their thesis statement's vague, say it's vague. If their thesis statement is clear, say it's clear. If their first sentence is a throwaway sentence that really doesn't tell you anything about what they're writing about, say that. If you can't figure out that they're answering question 1 or question 2 or question 3, or that they're trying to answer all 3 questions, you need to comment on those things. If their conclusion is just really a regurgitation of their introduction, say that. If their conclusion goes up an extra level beyond just summarizing what they've written to basically give you sewing together all their thoughts on things, say that. That's what this is for, to give you an exercise so that. Why am I doing this way? Because I'm tired, quite frankly, of giving grades based on a rubric that's already laid out in the syllabus, based on what I'm seeing in terms of both good and not so good, and even really bad in terms of some of the papers I've graded over the years. When students complain if they have a grade anything less than an A, then somehow I don't know what I'm talking about. Somehow I don't understand the connections they're trying to make. Um, and people crying, people pouting, people talking about getting back at me and those kinds of things. No. So you're part of the process. I am surrendering a certain degree of authority in this process to you as students so that you can evaluate each other. I will then come in somewhere toward the tail end of that. That means probably instead, the week that we, I guess is that the week that we don't meet. No, the week that we do meet, I guess that would be the second, sometime around between the second and spring break. I'll give everyone my feedback on their papers, right? Feedback without a grade, because it is ungraded and it is part of the process. So, and then with that, I want each of the students who wrote their papers to give me some self-evaluation in terms of determining what their grade is on their paper. That means providing feedback in the comment section of your assignment on Canvas and saying, well, based on what this anonymous reader said and based on what you've said, Professor, I think that my grade is B plus, A minus, C, whatever you think it is. I will take that into account. I'll take the grade that the anonymous reader, one of your classmates, gave you, and what you've given yourself, plus my own feedback, and essentially figuring out your grade, right? But I'm not going to tell you what that grade is because it is ungrading after all, right? I will look at that in comparison to with your projects, with your final projects, and see if you've made progress in terms of analysis, if you've made progress in terms of making connections, if you've made progress in terms of having a greater understanding of subject matter than you did on your term paper. And that will probably help me along in terms of determining the final grade for the course, right? But it all depends on how seriously you take this process. If I see folks who are just basically saying everything is great and everything is wonderful, you have an A, then I know you're not taking the process very seriously. I'm going to ask you to reevaluate, or I'm going to assign it to another student to take seriously. So I'm seeding, CEDE, seeding, like seeding ground here and saying, hey, I expect you to be mature enough, thoughtful enough, care enough about this process that you actually take it seriously. And, I want you to take it seriously because grading is a serious matter. I don't like grading. In fact, it's the one part of my job I wish I never had to freaking do. Okay, just to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't. If there was a way to just teach a course and let a computer assign your final grade so that I'm not sitting there having to deal with folks who are mad at me because they didn't get anything. I mean, I've had students get mad at me for giving them an A minus, right? Mind you, they might have earned an A minus, but I'm like, it's an A minus. I don't see what the big deal was, and they get mad about that. So to me, you seeing what the process really is like, and realizing, wow, this is not an easy process. This is kind of hard, right? Just doing one, try to do it for like 20 students, 30 students, 50 students at a time, shoot, 87 students at a time. It's hard, it's not easy. And it's not meant to be easy, right? You're evaluating someone else and you're trying to do it fairly, right? Compartmentalizing side the fact that you might like that student, or for that matter, you don't like that student. But it's not about liking or not liking, it's about whether they did what they were supposed to do. So that's that's roughly what we're going to do. I want you to come to class ready to ask me questions when we get to the section of talking about your papers and your paper assignment, which will be the last third of our class meeting on Wednesday. To be prepared to ask questions about everything I'm saying here and about my own expectations in this process. So, and what to expect yourselves. So that's it. Just wanted to make sure that you had some basis for understanding what we're doing on Wednesday, since part of what we're doing is going to be talking about your midterm papers. Okay, that's it.